Hello and welcome to the Michael Mamas Show. I'm your host, Michael Mamas. Ancient Secrets Revealed are coming to you from Mount Soma, home of the Sri Someshwara Temple in the mountains of western North Carolina. And I got a couple of interesting comments, and they just inspired what is really the essence of this podcast today. Before we do that, a couple things I want to say. Scotty, the country is really conflicted right now. I mean, it's almost like a civil war, and so it's like somebody has to step in and just, let's get down to what's reasonable. Let's get down to what's fair. Let's figure out what's really truly going on, as opposed to all the political contention, so we can proceed. And personally, I think that's the only group out there, to my thinking, that can do it is the Supreme Court. But I don't know what all their rules are. To me, they tend to be more passive than they should be. But I think to the extent that it's possible, I think they need to roll up their sleeves and just, take both sides by the hand and say, okay, you guys, you got to get it together. Anyway, that's just a thought. The other thing, I've been watching a lot of these things on YouTube, and a lot's going on with ancient Egypt. And did you see, Scotty, that in the Gaza Strip now, they're starting to excavate some underground, and it goes down levels, multiple levels, Egyptian ruins. And it's amazing that it just sat there and everybody, was going to the pyramid and the Sphinx, and nobody was really researching this, but they're doing it now. Hopefully a lot of new information will come out of it. But here's my feeling about ancient Egypt. One, they can't figure out, it's a big mystery, and what was the pyramid for and what was all this for. I think a big problem with the whole thing is that the people that are doing that research, the archaeologists and that, I don't think they have a very sophisticated understanding of the nature of existence, the nature of life, human evolution, spiritual growth. And so by virtue of that, they can't begin to understand what a lot of the technologies that those pyramids and that were built for. So they're just at a loss. And compounding that is the fact that there was this super ancient, 10,000 years ago or more. And then there was the few thousand years ago. And like I've said in previous podcasts and in my lectures and that cultures rise and fall. And why does a culture rise? It rises because it's living in harmony with nature. A big, huge mass of people, a whole culture is not going to prosper unless it's living in harmony with nature. It's possible one individual, a drug dealer or somebody, can become affluent and stuff and prosper in that sense, but not a whole culture. And then when the knowledge in that prosperous culture gets lost, then what happens is it starts to decay. The understanding starts to decay. So if you look at the tail end of an ancient culture, what you're seeing is that the knowledge as it stood after it was lost, after the real purity of the knowledge was lost. And that's why I think a lot of what they're seeing with, the focus on, the afterlife and creating these situations with mummies and all, so that the kings or whatever could live in a prosperous afterlife. That's largely a function of the demise of the culture. But the original ancient culture values had to do with principles that, kind of like Kaya Kalpa. Kaya Kalpa is a technique in Ayurveda that rejuvenates the body. And theoretically, a person can continue to get kaya kalpa from time to time every, I don't know what, 50, 100 years, and just rejuvenate the body in perpetuity. The ancient Egyptians, and a lot of what was done in the pyramids, you see a proper technology, or how do we want to say this? A really powerful unified field integrated technology affects all levels of life and all aspects of life. The physiology of the individual, the harmony with nature, the health of the environment, all of that. Sources of energy, the whole thing. And that was a knowledge that the Egyptians had, 10,000 years ago or more. More recently, I mean, 4,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago, that knowledge wasn't as pure as it was. And as that happens, see, what happens is the deeper you go from the surface of life, the physical, through the astral, as we were saying, into the celestial, and then finally the transcendental, things become more subtle, more elusive, so that when people start to live less and less in harmony with nature, their attunement with, and they're living in harmony with those finer values at the deeper levels is no longer accessible. And so then that's when the notions of divinity and God and that become more astral, more superficial. But nevertheless, the source of it is still the transcendent, still the absolute. It's not as firmly integrated. It becomes like an echo as opposed to a real harmonious thing. Is that making sense, Scotty?
Yeah, for sure.
All right. And that basic understanding, and I've said it in different ways, but that basic understanding that we just gave permeates so much. It permeates everything, our understanding of everything. And so it's important that we maintain that model, that understanding. Okay. Now, so I got two nice comments. I thought I'd read them and talk about them. The first one we'll address. It says, I've been thinking. Okay, there we go. I've been thinking about the astral life a lot in the past couple of years. I talked about it in my previous podcast last week. Since I'm getting older and the body is beginning to fall apart, it just seems to do that no matter how clean or holistic a life you've led. Now I wish I had more ice cream. Question is, do we have any control where we go after we leave the body? Interesting question. Our lives, you could say, boil down to two components. You could say predetermination and free will. What I mean by that, karma, it's just karma, cause and effect. And so the cause and effect laws of karma determine, it's like water flowing down a river and down a stream. How the current is moving is going to determine how it's going to be, a minute down the stream and 2 minutes down the stream. It's just a karmic continuum of just cause and effect. That's clear, huh, Scotty?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, combine that, and that's called predetermination. But also there's another component, and both of these things are about us. You say, do I, it says here, how'd she put it? Do we have control of where we go after we leave the body? Well, it's our karma. So in that sense, we're the ones that were involved in the creation of that karma. It's our karma. So yeah, but it's predetermined. But there's another component, which is free will. Free will is a function of how much we are functioning from integrated with that which lies beyond relativity, beyond the field of karma. And so that component is kind of like maybe you have a boat that's going down this river and the currents are directing their direction it goes. It's all karma. But you have a little rudder, and we can try to influence the direction we're going with that rudder, and that's free will. So the more we cultivate the strength of our functioning from the absolute itself, uh, the more free will we have to choose where we go. But either way, it's us that's determining it. If it's our karma, if it's our free will, either one, it's us. So, but karma is an interesting thing, because I mentioned last time that when Gandhi died, in the movie they had him say, "Oh God," well, right there, what he said was Ram. It's the mantra for God, which is very different than just saying, "Oh God," because it's the sound. It's not just the meaning, but it's the sound that really contains the real meaning. And they say when those words are on your lip, when that mantra is on your lips when you pass, that see, it's like if you dive into an ocean, you can do a swan dive, you can do a belly smacker, and the effects are going to be very different in how you enter. And so you might say that in that moment, if you don't hold on to relativity, if you don't fight the transition, if the transition is smooth, and if you have that mantra, for example, on your lips, then you're doing a swan dive, not a belly smacker. And that's going to determine where you end up and how you feel once you hit the water. Okay? Making sense, Scotty?
For sure.
Okay. And this was actually interesting. She says, many near-death experience people go directly to the void and bypass the astral altogether. Well, now we have to be careful there. Most of the near-death experiences you hear about, read about, watch about on the videos or TV or whatever, that's not when they go into these places of just exquisite level, and it's what we would think of as heaven and just beautiful and stuff. That's still, strictly speaking, astral, or if you want to name that, very subtle, very deep, very close to the absolute value of relativity. If you want to give it another name as opposed to subtle astral, you can go right to the level where you call it the celestial level. That's the level where the angels dwell, and they say that the angels, I think I talked about this before, the angels are so overwhelmed by the beauty and the exquisiteness of that level that they don't transcend. It's kind of like, it can be referred to as the golden chains of the celestial level. They can't even close their eyes to meditate, because it's just all so exquisite. You could say that with the ancient Egyptians and what they did with their kings and that, was they tried to create a situation where they go and they just dwell on that level. But it's still of the relative, and it still falls short, and it's certainly not the void. And I think here by void, she was referring to like the transcendent, the absolute. If she was, well, it's not what that is, It's just a very sublime, deep, profound, but still I would call it astral, unless you want to use the word celestial level. So then it gets blurred here. I don't quite trust the astral characters. Well, even if it's a subtle relative, it's still relative. It still has karma associated with it. It's still transient. And so you're there for as long as you are, and then, you're back. Kind of like you spent your, how they say that your cosmic currency by having a time off like that, so to speak. And then this is a good question. She says, I'm wondering what you think about people who practice out-of-body trips on purpose. Not a good thing. Popular, flashy, people think it's cool. But the thing is, what you want to do is integrate the subtle aspects of the physiology with the superficial aspects of the physiology with the transcendent even deeper. When you go out of the body, what that does is it disintegrates, it breaks down the integration between the physical body and the cellular aspects of the self. Uh, Also, if you do that and you're not highly evolved, what you're doing is you're creating karma on all these different levels. And that's a tough thing to unravel because generally speaking, you're not on those levels. So you got a bunch of karma there that it's at work. It's like baggage you're carrying and it's not easy to resolve. Okay. Uh, uh, and she said, sounds a bit risky to me. She's right about that. The other thing we want to address here is this whole thing about right-handed versus left-handed tantra. Right-handed tantra are spiritual practices that enhance the integration of the physiology. They evolve the person. Left-handed tantra is a very different thing. It breaks down the integration. But people are attracted to it because it's quick, it's easy, it's flashy. You get dramatic results. One example I like to use, and this is actually a common one, is subtle perception. As the physiology refines, as the awareness refines, perception refines. You start to perceive even on the celestial level, okay? But with left-handed tantra, oftentimes what they do is they go in there and they just mess up the subtle integration. For those of you familiar with chakras, what a good way of giving voice to it is to say they go in and they tear open or rip off the filter, rip off the cap, bust up, pry open the the third eye, the sixth chakra. That is not good, but people like it because wow, all of a sudden I'm seeing lights, and I remember the guru talked about celestial sight and seeing lights, and so this must be it. But they're very, very different. And that's a problem we get into a lot. I remember giving lectures back in, this was years ago, back when I was in university. And, I would talk about evolution. I remember I was at Berkeley once giving a lecture. And some guy jumps up and he starts saying, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. I gained enlightenment. I did this hit of LSD and I was seeing all these colors and I was feeling incredible. I was enlightened, he said. And I don't know. If you don't see the distinction between that and enlightenment, I don't think I can help you. I don't think I can say. Scotty, do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, it's like you've always talked about. It's like short-circuiting the system, or you're hot wiring the car, or you're doing something that.
Oh yeah, like another analogy we'd use is like if you have a fuse box in the basement and you burn out the fuse and you don't have a fuse handy, you might take some aluminum foil and stick it in there and all of a sudden the lights go back on. And so you think you just did a really good thing, but the problem is you can burn the house down. So that's why they say left-handed tantric techniques carry tremendous amounts of karma with them. Okay. All right, I think it's enough on that. To summarize, the best thing you can do is evolve, meditate, evolve, and if possible, that when the time of transition is coming, do your best that it's smooth, and that in that moment of the last breath, you just don't hold on, you don't fight it, you just rest into it. And with a mantra, a Sanskrit name of God, helps the transition. Okay. So here's the next one, which I thought was really good too. I really like this one. Hello, Michael. Is it all right if I ask a question? I've been having experiences where I can see how I'm projecting onto people and things. See that the whole thing gets so tricky because as she wrote on, it was more the feeling. This wasn't like an I get it syndrome, or we can all say, oh, yeah, right, I'm projecting everything and I get it. And that's not really it. That's a kind of a notion of it or some sense of it, because we all sense everything in the depth of our being. So to varying degrees, we sense it. But just the texture of what she was writing here, it was a genuine experience of a glimpsing of a higher level of consciousness. And how do I know that from reading this? I can just feel it in the way she wrote and the way she's saying it. Everybody says it differently. But nevertheless, it's what lies behind the words that you can feel when a person talks. We can all feel when a person talks something deeper, where they're coming from. It's common expression, okay? So she's projecting onto people and things. We all project all the time. This whole world is a world of projection. In Brahman consciousness, like I said, all this, you just see it as lightly etched on the face of being. It's a mirage. It's virtual. It's a projection, okay? And so what she's saying here, she says, I realized the other day in traffic as I looked at a McDonald's that I had even been projecting onto how I had always seen McDonald's, the restaurant, It's like, and we can just assume, I'm just making an assumption here, but she probably thinks, oh, it's really unhealthy food, blah, blah, blah. I don't know what she's projecting, but doesn't matter. But she says, it was like a light film of my own perception that had nothing to do with the franchise. That's great. And see, a light film of my own perception, a light film. See, I wouldn't put it that way, but I respect that, we all express it in our own way. A lot of times when I used to teach energy healing, hands-on healing, I say it different ways so somebody could feel a chakra or what have you. And it wasn't uncommon at all that finally I'd say it one way, and it would just all of a sudden that was the thing that worked for a person. They'd say, oh, wow, I think if you said it that way in the beginning, I would have been able to do it right away, So there is that subtlety to the expression of these subtle experiences. And I could tell the way she wrote this, there was feeling behind it that wasn't just emotional. It wasn't just projection or I get it syndrome, any of that. She says, this is interesting. She said, this is really interesting. She says, but since I have put it down in words, I've had a pit in my stomach. Well, that's what I talked about, and multiply that, 1,000-fold. I mean, because it's a beautiful glimpse. It's an excellent glimpse. It's definitely a signpost along the way for her growth. But imagine when you actually enter Brahman consciousness. It's not just a pit in the stomach. It's complete overwhelm that it can take a person the rest of their life to work through. But this is really great. This is really great. She says, the pit is the feeling that nothing I feel is real. Well, that's why we call it the cosmic joke, because it's a very interesting thing, because it's paradoxical. In that state, this is all etched lightly on the face of being, the absolute. And so, in one sense, the relative becomes meaningless. But in the state of integration, it's paradoxical, because when the physiology is integrated from the physical all the way to the transcendent, there's that integration. Then you can feel more deeply. It's like an anchor or a stabilizing. Like sometimes I compare it to the tail of a kite. The kite can soar more because it's stabilized and doesn't go into a spin. Like that, you simultaneously feel deeper, sense deeper, without just spinning. And at the same time, there's another level where it's like it's not even real. And one doesn't negate the other. if anything, one enhances the other. The tail enhances the kite, and the kite soaring enhances the value of the tail, But nevertheless, they're paradoxical. One soars, the other is stability, the anchor in the ship, So these are beautiful words here, really. The pit is a feeling that nothing I feel is real. See this, and that's that cutting edge that people enter when they start to have glimpses of this experience of that higher level of consciousness. Because it's, how do you deal with it? It leaves a pit in your stomach. None of this is real. My God, what has happened to me? That kind of a thing. So it's a very, very good experience. So every time let's see what you said. So every time I feel something, I don't know if it is real. See, dealing with that state of awareness takes time, and it's full of questions and doubts. And am I going crazy, or am I getting enlightened? I'm now questioning everything I feel, more the same, that confused state of overwhelm. I know it is about relationship with, which that's something I talk about it, and it's about what's your relationship with that not knowing, I know it's about my relationship with, but it goes into my belief that what I feel is not valid. It's a cosmic joke, man. It goes into my belief that what I feel is not valid. Well, on one side of the paradox, it's not. It's all illusion. On the other side, it has so much more meaning. It's so much more significant. It's so much more profound. So much more beautiful. It's so much more important. And so how do you reconcile all of that? I know I need to figure this out on my own. Absolutely true. The self is revealed, how they say, by the self, through the self, and to the self. And so ultimately, the Brahma Sutras or the words of the Guru or any of that, they certainly help. But ultimately, it's something that has to be found within one's own self. And I know other people don't have my conditioning around it. Well, join the club. We all have our own unique conditioning, our own unique programming, our own unique relationship with the world, our own projections and how we project onto the world. But see, when that's in early stages of ignorance, stages of ignorance, that's not our stuff. We consider that our truth. What we project is the reality, and this person's good, that person's bad, and that's the truth, and that's my truth, but blah, blah. So all that's starting to melt away. I don't know. I shouldn't laugh because I know the quandary it puts the person in, but it's just such a sweet and tender time in a person's evolution, But how do you move forward when nothing makes sense? Well, we just addressed it. It doesn't, and you work with it. For me, I remember this was decades ago. When was this? Early 80s. I brought up a similar question to the Guru, and it was really interesting. It's too intimate and too much of a story to really convey, but basically in his own way, he left it up to me to figure it out. And I so wanted him to just tell me, okay, what's happening? But the way he handled it was so exquisite. Didn't say as much as I've even said in this podcast about it to her. But ultimately, yeah, you have to figure it out for yourself. But these are all guideposts. For me, the Brahma Sutras helped tremendously. Okay. And I know other people don't have my conditioning around what they feel, but how do you move forward? Yeah. When nothing makes sense. It's sweet, it's beautiful. This is a very tender time in a person's life, and it's a glimpse. I'm not saying this person's in Brahman consciousness, but that's how, as we evolve, we have moments or periods of our life at different degrees of perception and different degrees of versus projection. It's just such a beautiful expression of the whole thing. And she ends it where she says, "Thank you, great podcast." So I appreciate that very much. I do. I wonder if anybody's out there listening.
Michael,
Yeah.
is it one of those things too? I remember you talking in the past about like these guys that are breathing fire, or they're, levitating or whatever, and it's like, yeah, just okay, yeah, that's great, just move on. I mean, so you can breathe fire. No, I mean, it's just one of those things that you go through. It's like, yeah, that's one of the, because we can get caught up in hearing about these things that happen when you start to get this type of consciousness, and then we get stuck in like currents where we're trying to do those things instead of just like, okay, that's just part of the process. Let's just keep moving, and
it's definitely a razor's edge, and we get seduced not just by left-handed tantra when somebody tears open your third eye and all this light starts flooding in, or all these different things that can happen, breathing fire, performing miracles, this and that. Those things, particularly, you see, when they're done in a manner that turns out to not be integrated, that's when we really get overwhelmed in it. When the abilities and things, whatever they may be, I'm not saying breathing fire, but when refinement happens in a more natural way, and that's the key, natural. That's the key, natural. Then they're kind of put in their proper place, and we don't get carried away with it, Yeah. So the whole path of evolution is subtle and has to be handled wisely and delicately. And that's why I feel really blessed by my teacher, as he was so masterful at how he did it, But it requires constant attention from the teacher. He once said, people's karma brings them to me, and people's karma takes them away. And when the karma takes them away, boy, they spin, I've seen it over and over, and it's just tragic, really. But anyway, there was a quote. This kind of refers back to what I said about the Supreme Court, but I just like this quote. I put it in the notes. All governments suffer a recurring problem. Power attracts pathological personalities. It is not that power corrupts, but that it is a magnet to the corrupt. I thought it was a good quote. Anyway, I think anything else, Scotty? I think that pretty much covers what I wanted to say.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. I appreciate you all listening, and we'll talk more next week. Thanks again.